Good afternoon. My name is Robyn Nichols, and I am here with Betsy Lake and Sarah Allison. And today we are going to discuss Ellis Chapter 9, Social Aspects of Second Language Acquisition. And I'm going to be covering three main ideas. The first thing I'm going to be covering is social cultural SLA. The second thing I'm going to do is the socio-cognitive approach. And the third thing I'm going to do is the conversational analytic approach. I have a video I would like to share with you, and I am going to pause the video at certain points so I can elaborate on my video. So, okay. Okay. So sociocultural SLA, and I don't know why my S is out, and I've noticed that in the other parts of the slides too. View learning as a participation in a culture, and it was developed by James Lantoff. And it covers three things: mediation, the zone of proximal development, and collaborative dialogue. I think Sarah's going to go over the ZPD. We've already gone over a little bit of that in our previous studies. So mediation is defined by Lantoff and Thorne as the process through which humans deploy culturally constructed artifacts, concepts, and activities to regulate or gain voluntary control over and transform the material world or their own and each other's social and mental activity. And I got that from Ellis, page 214. Mediation involves the use of tools that help learners perform a task in which they cannot perform successfully with their existing linguistic resources. And so these resources could include things like a dictionary that a learner could look up a certain word if he or she did not know. It could also talk about, or it could also use somebody like another person that would prompt the second language learner into remembering the right word. So those are artifacts that they could use to control and transform their world, their material world, or their own or each other's social and mental activity. Social interaction serves as the primary means for mediating learning. There are four major mediating devices that learners use: weighting, prompting, co-construction, and explanation. So it will be if you wait for somebody to give an answer, if you kind of help them along by prompting, you can co-construct where you work together to find an answer, and you can explain a further answer. The second thing I'm going to talk about is the zone of proximal development, and I'm really not going to go over that very much because we've talked about that a lot in our previous explanations. It was developed by Vygotsky. I think Sarah's going to go over that, but it is the zone of proximal development is the level of potential development. To use Vygotsky's own metaphor, it is the bud rather than the fruit of development. And this is found on Ellis, page 217. Let's see. It is a level of potential development as demonstrating in problem solving undertaken with the assistance of an expert or through collaboration with other novices. So you kind of find that groove in which you already know something, but you don't quite know it, and you can develop it more, and that's your proximal development, that sweet spot between what you know and what you don't know and you need to learn. So like I said, I think Sarah's going to go over that a little bit more, so I'll skip on that. And then the third thing I want to talk about right now is collaborative dialogue and languaging. And this was a further elaboration of Swain's output hypothesis. And we've already talked about Swain before. And she revised her output hypothesis, and she now viewed it as a socially constructive cognitive tool for mediating learning, and accordingly focused on examining the role of dialogue, and in particular collaborative dialogue, which she defined as dialogue in which speakers are engaged in problem solving excuse me, and knowledge building. And this is found on Ellis page 219. She talks about language related episodes that occurred when students ran into a problem. Were learners successful in jointly solving linguistic problems? Were learners subsequently able to use linguistic forms that figured in their solutions independently? In other words, Swain looked for evidence to show that collaborative dialogue and problem solving was also knowledge building. She goes on to talk about languaging, and that languaging, let's see, it articulates and transformed learners' thinking into an artifactual form, and thereby provided a means for further reflection on this form. Languaging then is not just a facilitator of learning, it is where learning takes place. And I forgot to mention that languaging can occur when any kind of problem arises, but the particular type that Swain was interested in was languaging about language. So it's kind of like a metacognition of what's going on. Okay, so. Okay. So this is sociocognitive SLA, and it was developed by Robert Batstone and Dwight Atkinson. And Robert Batstone was understanding how the social and cognitive dimensions intersect in second language acquisition. And he developed this in 2010. He acknowledges that there is both a social and cognitive dimension to all forms of language use, and thus it follows that second language acquisition, it is necessary, and thus it follows that to understand language acquisition, it is necessary to understand how these two dimensions interrelate. The sociocognitive approach emphasizes learning as participation when mind and body come together and through the interactions that occur in specific contexts. And what Batstone realized, that there are distinct cognitive and social dimensions that come together when we engage in social interaction. So he viewed these as distinct. And in contrast, Dwight Atkinson in 2011 takes a different view. He sees language as simultaneously in the world, but in the learner's head, and thus, it is neither social nor cognitive, but both together. And to me, that sounds very philosophical. It sounds like your mind just exploding. I saw a picture of just somebody's head exploding in from the inside of your head to the outside world. I can't describe this picture that I have, but it was very, very meta and very philosophical, I guess, for lack of a better term. So language exists in both cognitive, inside your head, and social space in outside. For example, you could have facial, your body language, facial expression, physical orientation, affective stance, a conventional social scene in a social setting with a social purpose performed by social actors. So you are taking all the social interaction, body language, your peers, other things, and you are learning inside your head. So it's very cognitive, you're learning, and then it's very social as well. And that's found on page 222 in the Ellis book. The key construct in Atkinson's theory is alignment. Through interaction, learners and their co-participants align adaptively to the ever-changing mind-body world environment. And I'll admit I got kind of confused because, like I said, it's almost very, I guess, Buddhist or something. I don't really know, but it sounds very Zen and Buddhist and very Eastern religion kind of thing going on with the mind-body world, almost hippie-ish, I guess. I don't know. So, but learning can occur inside and it can also occur outside. And so it's kind of like maybe a spectrum, I guess. I'm not really sure. So, all right. So we've already talked about this. There are distinct cognitive and social dimensions that intersect, and this is Atkinson's alignment. There's the spoken language and the body language out here. The environment constantly changes. So the third thing I'm going to talk about is the conversation analytic approach. And also it is learning as a social process. And it was developed by Hall, Hellerman, and Pickerick-Dorler, and Casper and Wagner. And we'll get to those people in a minute. But it is developed on interactional competence. It includes how the participants in an interaction mutually coordinate their turns. And as I thought about this, especially in today's context, especially with online learning, how do we do this, even as first language, native English speakers? How do we negotiate these social interactions, minus the language, because we're all not native language speakers, but how do we navigate these in an online environment? Because you can't obviously pick up on social cues as easily in an online environment as you can in a real world environment. So, the participants' actions and how they coordinate their turns, how roles are established and role relationships enacted, how linguistic and nonverbal resources are used to produce and interpret turns and actions, and how problems are required. So it's very highly situated. It really depends on the situation in which you are in. It depends on the people that you are involved with. It involves their personalities. It involves maybe dominant and subordinate personalities. Depends on the environment. Something that I like to say with my students in my school is who, what, where, when, and why. The 5 W's, who, what, where, when, and why. How does this figure into interactional competence? So, and these are the 5 researchers: Joan Hall, John Hellerman, Simona Pickerick-Dorler, Gabriel Casper, and Johannes Wagner. And it serves as a functional condition and also as an object of learning. And that's found on Ellis, page 224. It is concerned with how learners learn to talk. It is the conversation analytic approach is concerned with how learners learn to do talk and interaction, and how this leads to the acquisition of conversational structures, and also how specific linguistic forms are used and learned. And like I said, that may be even hard for some first language learners to pick up on social cues, and maybe even right now I'm thinking somebody maybe on the autism spectrum. How does that affect somebody whose native language is English, but they may be learning in their own way. They may be learning English as a language because they cannot pick up on those social cues. And they, in a way, they may be learning English just like a foreign or a second language learner learns English. I don't know. That's just food for thought. So anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you very much. And Betsy, take it away. Let me stop sharing my screen. There you go.
Thanks, Robyn. So ironically, I am presenting on the same 3 main points. So let me share my screen here. So I did an infographic, and I also talked about 3 approaches: sociocultural theory, sociocognitive theory, and the conversation analysis, with 3 I chose to focus on, and how they kind of all play into the social identity that we are really focusing on this week. So I'm going to just jump right in, talk about my first point, which is sociocultural theory. This was developed by several theorists, but the three that I was paying the most attention to was Lantoff, Vygotsky, and Ota. And what the sociocultural theory believes is that interaction is the primary means of mediating higher forms of learning, and this comes from Ellis on page 236. I wanted to kind of break down what these theorists believed, just so we could have a better understanding of what the theory really states. So Vygotsky believes that language development is a result of the interaction between biological abilities and culture. He was especially interested in children, and he did multiple studies on them. And he found that they make use of the assistance they receive from their parents to produce language. So I thought that was really interesting when I look back on when I was a child, and how it wasn't really explicitly told to me like how I was supposed to say things or how I was supposed to do things. But just because of the environment I grew up in, I understood, hey, you know, I need to say please and thank you. I need to address people with Mr. and Mrs. Because I was watching how my parents address people and our neighbors. So I thought that was really interesting how, again, it's kind of language is developed not necessarily just through explicit rules, but because of just being more of that, I guess, kind of that implicit learning approach again. Children watch their parents and then they produce language. They kind of copy them, they imitate them. So Vygotsky was really interested in looking at that element in that specific age group. Lantoff believes that mediation was key, or I should say is key, and he talks about using tools that make learners successful, whereas they would otherwise not be, and learners mediate on their own learning, such as self-regulation. And I think I have a good example of this that I wanted to bring up. This comes from the textbook, the Ellis textbook as well, on page 214. So it gives an example, and I'm just going to kind of read a little bit of this. The example is a beginner level learner was shown a card depicting a man holding an umbrella with rain falling onto the man inside the umbrella and asked what was wrong with the picture. The learner lacked the vocabulary to accomplish this task. The learner might have made use of culturally constructed artifact or a bilingual dictionary to access the necessary L2 vocabulary to mediate her performance of the task. However, this was not available to her. Instead, she performed the task with the help of her teacher. In other words, the mediation took the form of social activity. So we see, again, this social element instead of using actual physical tools, even though that can be used in this theory. On page 215, we actually see kind of the snippet of the conversation, and I kind of want to read that too. So we see the teacher say, look at this one. The learner goes, man and teacher. What's it doing? It's raining. Huh? The learner goes, raining? Teacher, raining. Teacher, what's the man holding in his hand? The teacher says, do you know what this is called? It begins with a, The learner sounds of trying to remember, so makes some sounds, trying to remember it, and then says umbrella. Teacher says, umbrella, yes. And where's the rain coming from? The learner says, water. Teacher says, water, yes. Where from? Teacher says, is it inside or outside the umbrella? The learner says, no. And then the teacher says, yeah, should be on the outside, yes. So it's interesting because like when we look at this, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, even when we're like reading it and we're looking at it, because like the language isn't what we're used to hearing. Like even I noticed like with the learner, the responses of the learner didn't really, it was hard to kind of follow. But the teacher was able to kind of mediate in this example and help the learner understand what was going on. And the learner therefore was even able to understand that, yeah, the water shouldn't be coming from inside the umbrella, it should be coming from outside. So I thought that was really interesting, and I could see how that could be an effective approach. And lastly, Ota believes that learners through inaudible speech or private speech can be successful in learning. And we see this in the classroom as learners may talk to themselves, repeating words after the teacher. We can see this in children and adults. And I actually was thinking about this one. Recently, I did a Zoom observation, and there was a teacher from the Literacy Center here in West Michigan. And she had like 6 adults in the room, and one of them specifically, I watched her actually do this. So the teacher would say something and I would watch her mouth and she would repeat what the teacher said. Sometimes I could actually even hear her say things, which could be a bit distracting, I think, to the rest of the class, because you could keep hearing her repeat these words. And a couple of times the teacher even said to her, "Hey, Francisca, like, can you just be quiet for a moment while I'm teaching?" But I think she used this approach, in order to like learn vocabulary and grammar. Um, so I don't know. I thought this is a very interesting theory to think about, and I could see how it makes sense naturally, that we would learn language in a social and cultural context. So the next one is sociocognitive theory, which I think out of all the theories, this is the one I think I believe in the most, actually. And this is when learning takes place when interaction achieves all alignment of the mind, body, and world. This comes from Ellis, a quote from Ellis in 236. And the two theorists here were Batstone in 2010 and Atkinson in 2011. And Robyn really went over this, I think, really well. But I just want to kind of make my 2 points about both of the theorists as well. So Batstone believes that learning occurs when the mind and body are both at work. But he says they're interrelated yet separate. And we can see this only in like certain contexts. So he, I guess, is more specific about when he believes that we see these two interrelate and work together. Where Atkinson is a very original idea, kind of like Robyn said, almost seemed a little bit hippie, kind of a interesting view on it. I actually wrote in my textbook, I don't know about this, just because I wasn't so sure if it made a lot of sense to me. So he believes that they're inseparable, so they can't be separated, but yet they're profoundly integrative. Well, if I can speak English. Making no hard division between the two. He believes that language coexists in a cognitive and social space. And the Ellis textbook gives the example of a simple activity to depict this, such as facial expression and physical orientations. How I understood this was like when he was saying, so when we communicate to each other, we could be doing multiple things with our face and our body. We could have a different position of our body, but our face could be doing something different. And so that's why he believes that they kind of all coexist and interrelate, I think. That's what I understood. Maybe I didn't understand it correctly, but this is the part that I pulled this from. So on page 222 in the Ellis textbook, I'm going to just read a short paragraph here. It says, for Atkinson, language coexists in cognitive and social space. For example, the simple activity of exchanging greetings involves facial expression, physical orientations, affective stance, a conventionalized social scene in a social setting with a social purpose performed by social actors and the effective deployment of the social tool of language. So you kind of can see how all of these things play in together. Cognition then is not something mental, but is fundamentally continuous with the world. In Atkinson's sociocognitive approach, neither language acquisition nor language use nor even cognized linguistic knowledge can be properly understood without taking into account their fundamental integration into a socially mediated world. Unlike Batstone, so this is the next paragraph down, and also unlike sociocultural theory, Atkinson rejects a view of learning as something that begins in the social world and then ends up in the learner's head. There is no such thing as internalization in Atkinson's theory. Learning is purely external phenomenon. And that's where I was like, that seems a little odd to me. Because I think it's definitely an internal phenomenon as well. So yeah, I would say I definitely relate more on Batstone's ideas. I think his ideas make a little more sense. But I also thought it was interesting, ladies, when we look at the dates of these two ideas, Batstone was 2010 and Atkinson 2011. So these are really quite new. I think one of the things we can say against this theory is there's not a lot of studies to prove that this is true. So I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in the field in order for us to say that this really makes a ton of sense. So kind of, I can see how Batstone's belief system kind of I think that I don't know how you cannot say that they're not interrelated. But I definitely think they still are separate, cognitive and social. So, all right, I kind of went on a long tangent on that one, so I'm gonna move to the next one. Conversation analysis. We see this was developed by Hutchby and Woofit in 1998, and then we see some new ideas from Casper and Wagner, which Robyn went over this already a little bit, 2011. So conversation analysis is when is conversation where learning starts and where it is consolidated. And it does not really so there's a difference here is it doesn't really reference inner cognitive state like these other two theories. The focus is actually more external, which I guess the focus being external could be kind of related to Atkinson's ideas. But analysts for this theory or idea have focused on two elements of conversation. So the focus is just on conversation. They focus on turn taking and repair. So turn taking, it basically is very intuitive. So speakers know, no matter what language you speak, that when one speaker's talking, the other one shouldn't be talking. And then once one stops talking, the other one's like, oh, I guess I can talk now. So they either contribute to the conversation by continuing to add content, or they are going to ask a question. Repair deals with when there is an issue. There's an error in communication, there's a misunderstanding. And so that's when one or both of the speakers recognize that there's an error and they work to fix it together. So that's kind of what this studies. And then the last element that I wanted to refer to is this doing learning that is found in the Ellis textbook as well. On page, I think it's 220, yeah, 225. And the kind of the description for this part, I wrote here, learners and their conversation partners engage in explicit learning events, but yet there seems to be less structure with this approach. So like, I guess one of the things I thought about with this is I was like, how do we prove that this is actually like that great? Like, how do we prove that just having conversation is going to lead to acquisition? The book also does talk about short-term and long-term development, and kind of how that plays out. Yeah, I'm not going to actually go into that really right now. But I think there just needs to be more studies, probably again done with this. It does say in the book there's now a rich literature on the application of conversation analysis in SLA, but there still needs to be more work done because it's purely descriptive right now. So again, we don't really see it in action. Or I feel like we don't really understand why it's useful. We don't really have true facts about it yet. Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to pull from here was conversation analysis and analysis. They base their work on very narrowly transcribed conversations in order to examine them in minute detail. Markey, which I actually didn't write down here, but in 2005 listed what he continued the minimal requirements for a CA transcript, so conversation analysis transcript. So he believes that it needs to at least show that members hesitate, pause, or become silent during talk, how they speed up or slow down their delivery, how they modulate the volume of their speech, and how they emphasize certain words or sounds through stress, and how they overlap each other's talk. Thinking about that, another quick note that I think I can think about how this could play out in the classroom is I've been studying phonology or phonetics, right? And that's the other class I've been taking this master's program. And we've really studied different stresses and how we talked about how English is a stress time language. So no matter how many syllables are in a sentence, our sentence length is going to be the same and our stresses are going to be the same. So one example we can think about how we could see this in conversation analysis and how we could even help our learners to make sure they sound more maybe native-like or can be more understood by native speakers is we could look at a sentence like the cats chase mice. So cats chase mice, that's where the stress is in the sentence. If we said the cats are quickly chasing the mice, notice how I say this, cats chase mice. The cats are quickly chasing the mice. Same length. The only difference is I speed up those other words that are not as stressed. Cats chase mice. The cats are quickly chasing the mice. Very interesting. In Spanish, it's syllable timed. And so in Spanish, we would have a sentence, but it's actually going to get lengthened because it's based on syllables. So the longer the sentence, the longer the time. So I think that, I guess I just started thinking about that when I read this just now. How, yeah, they will emphasize certain words or sounds through stress and how they overlap each other's talk. It says conversation analysts have identified a number of rules that underlie speaker selection and change. Only one speaker speaks at a time, and a speaker can select the next speaker by nominating or by performing the first part of an agency pair. So we can see this play out in everyday conversations. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting idea, and I think it probably needs more work. But yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. I've been kind of going for a while, so thanks for listening. I'm going to transfer this over to Sarah Allison.
Alrighty, thank you, Betsy. I also have a little infographic to share with you guys. Let us see. I think here we go. Okay, so here we go. Social aspects of second language acquisition. So this chapter kind of, at least the part that I'm going to talk about, kind of counters the dominant cognitive model. Oop, I have a typo there. Cognitive model of second language acquisition, but the social factors play into language acquisition just as much, or maybe even more, in my opinion, and we'll get to where I'm going. So this first one, Schumann's acculturation model from 1978. So it's based on the process of acculturation is the process by which a second language, oh, my cat jumped on my back. Oh dear, sorry, you scared me. Okay. I'm sorry, what? Stumpy, get down. Okay. I'm so sorry about that.
I love his name.
Anyway.
Stumpy.
I mean, he's got like half a tail. Anyway. Okay. So, acculturation is the process by it, he never does that. Anyway, that's why it scared me so much. Like, he never jumps up there. Anyway, okay. Acculturation is the process by which a second language learner becomes adapted into a new culture. So it's more than just learning a language. The whole thing behind it is that you're learning the culture with it. And that can like push you forward into like better second language acquisition. So it's based on 8 factors. Social dominance, which is if you're thinking kind of like going back to that language distancing, where like you know, like how far apart are your languages that you're like your native language versus the language you're learning. And so I completely just lost my page. Okay, I'm all shook up. So social dominance, it would be like, you know, which is the dominant or subordinate or culture that you're coming from, or in some cases they might be even. Like I would think that, I don't know, I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh. So it factors in like politically, culturally, technically, like technology or economically superior or inferior countries or the same. I'll keep going. The integration pattern, which is whether or not the second language group assimilates into the culture of the language that they're trying to learn. I think I'm explaining this very wrong. I'm just going to keep going. Enclosure, which is the extent of which the second language group shares the same social facilities or has different social facilities. Cohesiveness, which is the extent to which the second language group is characterized by intergroup contacts or intergroup contacts. Size, whether the second language group constitutes a numerically large or small group. Attitude, whether the second language group and target language group may hold positive or negative attitudes towards each other. And intended length of residence. So that's whether the second language group intends to stay for a long or short time. So these things are kind of all going back to Schumann did this study on 6 learners. And in one particular, Alberto did not do well. And so they were trying to figure out like why his classmates did better and he did not. And Alberto had many situations against him in terms of these factors. So his group is socially inferior to the target language group. Neither the group nor target language sought assimilation. His group was characterized by high enclosure. The second language group was relatively cohesive and large, and the level of cultural congruence was not high. Negatively cohesive and large, negative attitudes predominated in both groups. So he did not acculturate and had little need to communicate with members of the target language group because it sounds like he focused like on with his second language partners. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if it sounds to me like they are coming from the same culture, learning another culture, and he didn't acculturate. I think I explained that I'm just gonna keep going. Oh my gosh. Okay, next one. Gardner's socioeducation model. We've talked about this many times before. Keeps popping up. It's from 1985. So it's based on the environment that learning takes place. And a quote from the book is that it's is acquiring symbolic elements of different ethno-linguistic community. So within this, you have like, there's 4 aspects: the social, cultural milieu, which is the environment, individual learner differences, the setting, and learning outcomes. It's a rough one today, guys. It's rough. This is like throwback to PLC #1 where I don't have my thoughts together. Anyway, that's the very, very brief and not very descriptive socioeducation model. Oh my gosh. The next one, zone of proximal development. So Robyn did touch on this in her presentation. So when we're thinking of the zone of proximal development, so there's these layers. I have this thing here. Let me try to zoom in. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, you can't read that. Okay, never mind. I know what it says. So in this outer ring, you have, oh, maybe I can't read it. Oh my gosh. Oh, learner cannot do. It says learner cannot do. So you have the outer, so like the first level of development, you know, is like very basic. You're going and you don't know anything. The next one would be zone of proximal development. And then the inner circle is learner can do, unassisted. So that's, you know, where you acquire the language. And this zone of proximal development, this one really, that's why I wanted to do this one separately. It really stuck out to me because, and like Robyn said, I'm going to use the same quote, it's the bud rather than the fruit of development. And I think a lot of a student's outcome really hinges on this zone right here. So it's kind of going back to that last week, you know, you have the modified output and input where you're the learner's saying something, it's being corrected, it's getting changed, and that is kind of this dynamic assessment, which is modifying learner performance during the performance itself. So you're really getting that good interaction. There we go. So it's, oh my gosh, like I think my cat's going crazy. Anyway, you're really, has to do with the second language learner and the either teacher, another person in the society. Society is not what I wanted to say. Oh my gosh. Anyway, the master of the language is, correcting, interacting with the learner. It doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher, so it can be out and about in the world, in the culture, and you're having that like push and pull before, so you're not complete beginner and you're not fluent. I just think it's a really important zone. It's an important time in a second language acquisitioner's life, zone of proximal development. Anyway, that is my presentation. It's all done. It was rough. It was rough on you guys. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'll
You
shut
did an
up.
excellent job. Thank you. You did an excellent job. So, okay. So what are our top 5 ideas that we got from our presentation today, ladies? I know, let's see, Betsy, you talked about, oh shoot, I already forgot.
Same ones as you, my friend.
I'm sorry?
Same ones as you, my friend.
Yeah. So I know, and I already forgot them. No, but I know, that's so sad. So, no, I agree with you. I thought Atkinson, I was like, no. But I agree with Batstone a little bit more. Do you want to put his sociocognitive approach down there? And
yeah, I do. I think it's hard to deny. It's not like language learning and acquisition is not. I mean, it's both social and cognitive, and I think they do play on each other.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I would say it's completely like Atkinson. He said there was like no division. Like it was just like very fluid. And I'm like, I feel like there's kind of a division just because, I don't know. Like, I guess when you even look at the brain, like someone's social development is different. Some like, actually, I thought about this, Robyn. You kind of mentioned like someone, like if you're working with someone that's special ed or something, right?
Right.
Like they have like people that are special ed sometimes are extremely like higher than normal like levels of smartness for like certain areas of study. Like maybe they're like really, really high in understanding like mathematics, but socially they may be behind a little bit.
Yeah.
Compared to normal, like what the normal range is.
One of the notes I put with Atkinson was body language. I wrote that note in the margin, and body language really is, I mean, I could see Atkinson's point. I really can, because a lot of our language is body language. So
yeah,
so and that like nonverbal, other nonverbal, and other, oh my gosh, other nonverbal cues. Like you have whole classes in college, multiple classes on like nonverbal behaviors and communication. I really liked, Betsy, your third, when you were describing the communicative, I can't remember exactly.
Oh, the conversation analysis?
Yeah. Conversation, yes. I really enjoyed listening to you talk about that, and that I think that should definitely be one of the 3. If not, like one of, maybe in the top 3, I don't know.
Okay.
I thought it was very interesting and important having that.
Yeah, like interaction.
Conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting to look at like the 2 elements too that a lot of the analysts focus on, that I mentioned, repair and oh shoot, I just forgot the other one.
Hold on, I got it.
Repair and oh, here it is. Yeah, turn taking and repair, because those are like very intuitive and we do it like while we talk with people. And so like no matter the skill levels in whatever language you're speaking with another person, like that's kind of still understood, because in most languages that's like a rule, right? So agreed. I think that would be important.
Okay, so that would be conversation. Okay, I wrote that down, and let me write turn taking and repair. Okay, good. All right. Do we let's
I also
see.
think what you have, Sarah, like I think it's hard not to keep in mind age, like an acquisition. And you talked about the zone,
Right, I wrote
Zone
that down.
approximate.
yes, I think that's
Right.
still like, even though I don't always like it because I'm working with adults and I don't want them to ever feel like they can't learn because they're
Right.
old. Like I'm like, you can't help but say that plays a part when
Yeah.
someone starts to learn
Actually, I
the
use
language.
that in reading instruction. You know, you don't want to choose a book that's too hard, but you don't want to choose a book that's too easy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. But adults are going to have some struggles just because if they're learning later in life, that they may never be exactly native like, but they can still be understood. And that's really what our goal is I think instructors to get them there. But I think it still does play a part, especially on the cognitive side, you know? So that would be another one I think we should include. Also, I really liked the one, Sarah, you talked about with the Schumann's
okay.
acceleration model.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Acculturation.
Let me write
That's all
Hard to
English,
say.
native English speakers can't even say it. But yeah, that's the one.
It needs a better name.
Yeah, but that, I think, I really liked how you use those other 8 like sub factors. And one of the ones I was really interested in was when you talked about length of time. And I started thinking about, like, you know, you and I both have studied abroad, right? And the fact that, like, okay, I studied abroad 3.5 months, but I can't imagine if I would have studied abroad for a year, how much more I would have developed, like how much better my Spanish would have gotten. Or I thought about missionaries that go overseas. So like someone that might be overseas for just a limited amount of time might not be as motivated to learn the language of the natives. So someone that knows they're going to be there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years or longer are going to be a lot more motivated to learn. So they're probably going to become a lot more, I don't know the word, accumulated. You know what I'm saying?
Like,
Acclimated, like
Acclimated, yeah.
Acculturated,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
So I think that model made sense to me when I thought about it when you were talking about it. So
I have some missionary friends. It's funny. I have some missionary friends that are in Mexico. And not only are they being missionaries to Hispanics, but they are also being missionaries to deaf Hispanics. So
really?
they've actually had to, yes. It is,
so
it's crazy.
Two languages
right.
then. Wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and they're a husband and wife team, and they both agree that the wife is more fluent, although they're both fluent in both languages. The wife is more fluent in
sign
language, and then the husband is more fluent in spoken Spanish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, because what were your 8? Can you tell me what your 8 were again? I mean, I probably can look at the book. It's in there. But...
it's on page. I have it right here because I just turned to it. It's on page 208.
208. Yeah.
208. Okay. Yeah, I was too far back. I was towards the back of the book. Oh yeah, there they are. Social dominance, integration patterns. Yeah, but the intended length of residence really struck something in me. I was like, that just makes sense. A L2 group intends to stay for a long time or a short time. That's going to make a difference in how well they're going to be able to acquire that language. Attitude kind of goes with motivation.
And not only with that length of intended residence, like, so yes, like if you know how long you're going to stay there, that's obviously a big motivator. Like you just said, like if you know you're only going to be there for 2 weeks and you might not. But also, I think this is kind of, it's similar, but anyway, how long you're there too. Like, so I knew I was going to be in Korea for 6 months. I knew that. I still tried my hardest to learn as much, like I wanted to be completely fluent anyway, even coming back to the States. But like, I was only there for 6 months. Like, I imagine what I could have been in that year. Like you just said, like, so it's not even just like, there is the motivation. I just twisted up what I wanted to say. I think I completely said it backwards. What I wanted to say. I think the motivation behind like your intention to stay is kind of more, I don't know what I'm
I think I know.
doesn't
No,
wanna-
I think I know what you're
yeah,
saying.
confused.
I think I know what you're
know
trying to say. Yeah, because Robyn was just talking about her
Yes.
missionary friends, right?
Yeah.
So not only does
I
the
mean-
length of stay matter, but why are they there? So like for them, their motivation is they want to be able to spread the gospel. And so for them, it's even more imperative that they can speak that language. So like for you,
I mean,
like what would be your reasons to
yeah.
want to speak? Yeah. Japanese. So like that's
like,
also important. Sorry. Go ahead.
and Sherry and Mike, the missionaries, I mean, they're native English. I mean, they grew up in my community. I mean, they sold their house. They sold their house to go to Mexico. So, I mean, when you sell your house, it's pretty permanent.
Yeah. Yep. So, and then I'm trying to think of some other ones that you pointed out. The size of the group, I thought that was interesting because you talked about his name was Alberto. You referred to him and about like why he struggled because partly he was like, I think how I understood he's overseas in a large group. And so like it was also hard for him to maybe like spend time with the locals or be able to be taking part in cultural activities because he just stayed in his safe group that he was in.
Well, it says that he was number one, he was in the USA. Number two, he was in a Spanish minority in a Portuguese area. So that was like two strikes against him. Not only was he trying to learn English, but then he had to assimilate or whatever you want to call it with the Portuguese and then in his own Spanish Costa Rican enclave.
And I think, would you ladies agree? You see this in the States too. So let's say there is there's high speaking Spanish groups like in the, they're not even with Spanish, but like in Michigan. Okay. So we have our east side of the state, we have a huge group of people that are from like Middle Eastern countries. And so like a lot of them speak a completely different language. They may be in the States for 20 some years, but they may only stay in this little group. And they live in the same neighborhoods. And so they never really become fluent in English because to survive, if they stay in this little pocket, they just keep speaking whatever their first language is. And I see that with Spanish communities too in my area in Grand Rapids. That there's a huge population. And they're like, you can just go years without really learning a lot because you just go out with your friends that maybe are better English speakers than you, or you stay in your community, you buy your groceries in the community, you go to the same bank, as everyone else. And so I thought that I really like this model. I almost think this might be my favorite, like out of the 5.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So
I also like my Korean teacher from the States, been here 30 years. And she still struggles with English, but it's because of that exact reason. She goes to a Korean church. She only hangs out with like Korean people except for her students. I remember like my 4th class I took with her, she was like, Sarah, how can I improve my English? And I'm like, I'm not a teacher. Like, I don't know. And it's just so fascinating to think about. And even when I was in Korea, like I had foreigner friends that were not confident in their Korean skills, so they relied on me to talk to everyone, and then they didn't get as much out of it as probably I did.
Right. Yeah, it's similar to me. I spent more time with my host mom than I did the kids in my group, and I think that made a big difference for me. Not only did I get close to her, like more on an emotional level because we spent time together. We would go out for the day on a day trip and just go travel and go to museums, and I'd learn about the history of Costa Rica. And I just had a lot of conversations with her. And I think because of that, my Spanish increased more so than a lot of people in my program, because I spent more time with her than I did them, and it wasn't to be mean, but it was like, I'm here because I want to learn Spanish, not socialize with you in English, So, so I really like this model. So I think we can maybe all agree that,
Yeah. No. I'm just saying, so number 1, and these are in no particular order right now. We have the socio-cognitive approach, conversation analysis, acculturation model, zone of proximal development. And like I said, those aren't in any particular order, so.
Okay, yep, you're right. So I forgot about zone of proximal development. Okay, I didn't write that one down yet. Okay.
Yeah, sociocognitive, conversation analysis, acculturation.
And then we've got sociocultural was another one we touched on.
Yeah, okay, we could do.
Yeah.
Let me go back to that page. Well, that covers kind of Vygotsky, ZPD, zone of proximal development.
So
Yeah, and I also think acculturation is under that too.
Okay, so we can, okay.
So we're going to break out of just that category maybe a little bit then.
Yeah, so do we want to put mediation then? Because you, Betsy, you and I both talked about mediation.
Yeah, where would that was under more that sociocultural or cognitive, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that was on page, that's sociocultural on page 214.
You're right, that was under the sociocultural. That's not a bad idea. So instead of making that one so specific, we'll just say, so we'll say Schumann's acculturation model, sociocognitive theory, and that one we're just going to stick with that. And then we've got conversation analysis, zone proximal development, and then we're going to do mediation.
Right.
Will be our top 5. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think that would work. Now, we have to discuss which ones we think are most important, Phil. From top to bottom. I think we both all of us talked really highly on the conversation analysis and the acculturation model.
Yeah. And I can honestly see where conversation analysis and the Atkinson's theory can kind of mesh together, because, if we're talking about body language, and then the what is it? The turn taking and repair. Yes, because you really rely on body language and your social cues with that,
Yeah, it's that more of the external focus instead of internal.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah.
So we can do, let's see. So do we want to put zone of proximal development as number 5?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, number 5 for that.
Because it does have an influence, but however, it's like, I don't know. I think, again, we
I'll tell you what. Then what would be our number 1? Let's do our number 5 and our number 1, and then we can fiddle around with the middle parts.
Okay. I go with the acculturation model. That's my vote.
Yeah, I can see that.
Number 1?
Yeah. I really like that one.
Yeah.
I kind of do too.
I can see that.
I've been a big proponent. Is that the right word? Anyway, I've been a big yay for culture things. I really think the best way to learn a culture is to
immerse yourself,
or learn a language is to immerse yourself, and that's pretty much what that is the factors that help you do that. And my whole time as a grad student in this program, I've been culture, go immerse yourself. That's how you learn the language. I know it's not practical for everybody, but I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, you're really high on the culture and social side of it, which I think it makes sense, and there's studies that show it does, Yeah. Okay, so Schumann's little acculturation model. Then did you want to do conversational analysis?
So, our least is the zone of proximal development, Vygotsky, and our first is the acculturation model. So do we want to, where do we want to put conversation analysis in the middle of all that?
Yeah, I would say number 2.
Okay.
Okay.
And mediation and sociocognitive. Let's look.
My vote would be, I think, well, let me look again. Let me think about it. Let me look at my.
I was going to say, I think mine is sociocognitive 3 and then mediation 4.
Oh, gosh. Sarah, you and I are on the same page today, my friend. That's what I think, too. I'm with you on that. Because I think the social cultural was more on the, we talked about, or not cultural, I'm sorry, sociocognitive.
Yeah. I could see where you're going with that, because really the mediation and the zone of proximal development, I mean, they're pretty close. I wouldn't say they're closely related, but they fall under the same umbrella of whatever it is. Social, where is it? I forgot where it was.
I think why I feel that way is with mediation, I think it's important. Because like when I think especially with the conversation between a teacher and a student, so a native and a non-native, like I think it is good for the native to sometimes interject and say, whoa, actually, we have to say it this way, or hey, let's think about how you just said that. You know, like I think it's important. However, even if there's no mediation, I think learners still learn just by even listening, and paying attention.
Yeah, but I think that mediation helps find that zone of proximal development. I think that's why they're kind of tied together, is that you have that mediation either between an expert, or you can also probably have a mediation, you know, between the novices, maybe.
True. Yeah.
And I didn't even mention really private speech, but I did read about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's also, you know, that could be mediation with self too. So here I sound like I'm getting all psychology.
That private speech, though, that was under the umbrella of.
That was under mediation. It's on page 215.
Yeah. Shoot. No, I'm not so sure. I'm confused. You're right, because I did like that point.
See, I thought mediation would be number 3 and sociocognitive would be number 4, but that's just me. I just thought
right, because that's under that more that socio-cultural umbrella, which we're pulling actually a lot of things I think from that area.
Because you know, I liked the conversation with the umbrella conversation. I read that before. Obviously, I read that before you mentioned that because it was part of the reading. But I did like the conversation about and how the teacher or the interlocutor was able to draw out the appropriate meaning and words from the student.
Oh, the umbrella scene, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh, you're right. I did like that too. And really, like the learner was able to do it with just a little mediation from the. Okay, so I'm just like looking at these areas. Okay, real fast. So mediation would be considered sociocultural. So with the zone of proximal development, which we have towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Then Schumann's. Let's see where Schumann's fits in here. I think that's more under the socio.
Yeah. We said that was number 4.
I'm just trying to figure out where they were listed here in the book again. Yeah, this is actually more under the. Yeah, this is actually more under its own umbrella. Schumann's is acculturation model under social factors. Then looking at sociocultural, that's mediation. Yep. Sociocognitive was, because sociocognitive is actually where the conversation analysis fits in.
Sociocognitive.
No, for real.
Okay. Was that me?
I don't know. Was it me?
That was my phone. My phone's on low battery and it tells me, sorry. I think that was my 10%. Anyway, yeah, that was my 10% of warning.
That was kind of depressing and spooky there.
Okay, girls. I'm gonna stay with my position. I think my position would be Schumann's first, acculturation model. Then I would do conversation analysis because it falls kind of with that cognitive. It's under the same
Right.
area. Then I would end with sociocultural, personally, with this mediation, zone of proximal development. So at least all the categories are kind of like top to bottom.
Yeah. Well, since both of you agree on those, the 3 and 4. So it's a 2-1 vote. So yeah, I'll go with yours.
Unless you want to do what we've done before and we say, okay, Robyn actually thinks this one and the other two think, because we've done that.
Yeah.
So we can do that again. Because there really, in this book, I mean, that we read with Ellis, there wasn't really a lot other than mediation or conversation analysis mentioned.
Yeah.
Besides, yeah. Well, languaging was one, I guess we could talk about. Well, it's more on that doing learning, I guess, which I kind of looped in with the
doing learning is, but it's also, it says doing learning is clearly very similar to Swain's languaging. You know what? And the thing is, I just now thought about it. It's like what I tell my daughter. You got to play school. You know. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're good. I said we do those 5.
Yeah.
So Miss Early talked about them. We're saying number 1, Schumann's acculturation model. Number 2, conversion analysis. 3, sociocognitive theory. 4, mediation, and 5, zone of proximal development.
Yes.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.